Okay, so now we're going to talk about art and architecture in the early empire. Um, so let's do a little like history recap of where we're at. Julius Caesar, we've heard of Caesar, he's the guy with a salad named after him, right? So we have Julius Caesar, he's killed on the Ides of March in 44 BC. There's a civil war, we talked about that in the intro a little bit. And then in 31 BC, Octavian, who is Caesar's nephew and adopted son, therefore his heir, crushes Mark Antony and Cleopatra's navy at Actium. So he wins the civil war, okay? The Senate confers the title Augustus, which means exalted one, or it can also mean majestic, to Octavian. So he's now Octavian Augustus. And unlike previous consuls who were elected and overseen by the Senate and then occasionally had dictator powers during times of crisis, he is Octavian Augustus from the go. So he is the emperor from the go. So he has all kinds of powers. And instead of just being like a consul and having these dictator-like powers over the military in a time of crisis, he takes on all of these different positions that had previously been held by lots of different people. So I'll just give you a rundown of that really quick. So he's the princeps, that's the first citizen, okay? He is the consul, which is kind of like a president, we talked about that before. He's the imperator, which means he's the commander-in-chief of the military, okay? And that's where we get the word emperor from the word imperator. After 12 BC, he's also the Pontifex Maximus. That's the chief priest, so the head of the religion as well. It's kind of like a pope. This is pre-Christianity, but it's sort of like a pope of the Roman religion. He has control of all public life. Ostensibly, there's still a Senate with a constitution, but he basically has all the big roles, so he can kind of do whatever he wants. This is unprecedented in the history of Rome so far. So we're moving into a new era, which is that of the early empire. Octavian Augustus stabilizes the entire Mediterranean. Now remember, when I use words like unify and stabilize, it means he conquered everything, right? Okay, so these are these kind of tricksy words. And so we enter an era called Pax Augusta, which means Augustan peace. This prevails for 2 centuries and then becomes Pax Romana, which means Roman peace. So basically, when you have a big empire like this that's controlling a whole region, if it's successful, one of the things is that it is quite stable, and this matters a lot to us because in times of stability, there's more time for intellectual advancement, structural discoveries, new technical discoveries, and just more time to make art and architecture. Okay, so we also have more infrastructure during this time. More roads, more bridges, more theaters, more public bathhouses, more of all of these sort of things. Also, we have the emperor and his empire as a patron of the arts, okay? So we have lots of imperial sculptures. We have sculptures that are engraved with the great deeds of the leaders to remind everyone where the peace and prosperity come from. Kind of like when we were talking about the Egyptians, how Ramses II had statues of himself all over the place, just to kind of remind people that they were enjoying this nice life because of him, right? Okay, so it's kind of a visual reminder to the populace of who is providing this to you. Okay, the portraits are designed to sway the public opinion rather than to record historical fact. That makes these portraits a form of propaganda. Okay, so let's look at one example of them. So this is a portrait of Augustus as a general. So Octavian Augustus does all of his conquering when he is only 31, which is quite young, right? So this rule of the elders that made Verism popular kind of comes to a halt, because now the guy who's the main guy in charge of everything is only 31 years old. And so we see a shift in the stylistic preference in sculpture back to showing people who are youthful, who are kind of timeless and immortal, more like gods, as opposed to showing the wrinkles and the receding hairline and things like this that we saw during the Roman Republic when Verism was popular. So big shift there. We have a youthful head of state. Also, the Senate declares Julius Caesar a god after his death, even though they helped assassinate him. This is under the pressure of Octavian Augustus. He believes that his father, his adopted father, Julius Caesar, should receive the apotheosis. The apotheosis is this concept in Rome where emperors, after their death, if they do a good job, are literally deified and become gods themselves. Okay, so similar process to what we saw with the pharaohs in Egypt, except this is not just an automatic thing. It's something the Senate actually votes on, which seems a little strange that they can vote on who gets to become a god, but okay, so that also, this idea of apotheosis also underlines this idea of the emperor as this timeless, godlike, youthful figure instead of this idea of aging and Verism being shown. So the portraits of him don't age, okay? So he rules for a really long time, but he's always portrayed like this, like he looked when he was 31 when he first took over. All right, so let's look at some of the details in this portrait. This is pretty interesting. So first of all, we note that he is youthful. Okay, so big change from Verism. Second, look at the position he's in. He has one hand extended upward like this. That is the pose of an orator. So the fact that he is the princeps, the first citizen, and the consul, those roles are part of his role as an emperor. He wants it to be shown that he is a good orator, that he's a good first citizen, he's good at speaking to people, he's good at that aspect of his job, okay? So that's the pose. Also note what he's wearing. He's wearing his armor because he is also the imperator, which is the commander-in-chief of the military, right? So he's the general, he's the head general. So he's wearing his cuirass, he's wearing his outfit that you would wear into battle. If we look, we'll look more specifically at what is on his cuirass in a second, but the other striking thing that you notice right away about this sculpture is there's a baby clinging to him. What's up with the baby? Well, the baby is Cupid. You'll notice he has wings. Why would Cupid be holding on to the leg of a dictator, of a Roman emperor? Well, that is to establish and kind of underline and draw attention to Octavian Augustus's godly lineage. Okay, so he traces the Julian line of the Julian dynasty, traces their lineage all the way back to Venus, and Cupid is Venus's son. So rather than having Venus with him, he has Cupid. Why? Well, one, he wants to have that connection to his distant relative Aeneas, who fought in the Trojan War, who was the son of Venus, so he was a half deity, a demigod. So he wants to underline that, but also, who's Cupid's other parent? Well, it's Ares, the god of war, right? And so he also wants to have a connection to, Mars. In Roman, it's Mars. So Mars, which in the Greek tradition is Ares, the god of war. So he also wants a connection to the god of war. So he wants to underline that connection as well. Okay, so that's why Cupid's there. What else is going on here? Well, on his cuirass, on his armor plate, on his chest, it's illustrated this diplomatic success story. So in the battle with the Parthians, they stole Rome's banner, their like flag that they take into battle. They stole their banner from the Romans, and Octavian Augustus diplomatically negotiated with them and had the banner returned. So not only is he a general, is he an orator, does he have godly heritage, he also is a diplomat. He's also capable of these sensitive diplomatic discussions with leaders of other groups of people. So there's a lot packaged into this fairly simple representation of him, right? So this is pretty typical. This is a typical representation. You also want to be able to identify who this is and tell me some of that information about why specifically Cupid's there, what's going on with the design on his armor, why is he in this pose, why is he youthful looking. I'm going to ask you about it on a quiz and probably on your final. Okay, so make sure that you kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so really quickly, other things about Octavian Augustus's family. He's married 3 times. He doesn't like have his ex-wives assassinated or anything. He just divorces them, so nothing like Henry VIII going on here. But his 3rd wife is Livia. She was also previously married and had children, and he adopts her children, just so that you know about his heirs. So his son, Tiberius, becomes emperor after him, and he adopts him as his son, but he was actually Livia's son from another person. So he becomes his heir. Then he has his son, Claudius, Drusus, who was from a previous, was also his adoptive son from a previous marriage of his wife. And then he has his grandson Claudius and his great-grandson Caligula and his great-great-grandson Nero. All of them become emperor. So this line goes on for a long time. Okay, so the Julian line goes on for quite a while. Okay, just a little note that we've got a lot of emperors coming down through this dynasty. So Octavian Augustus writes a book. It's called Re Gestae Divi Augusti, which means the achievements of the deified Augustus. So very humble title for your memoir, right? The achievements of me, the god, basically is what it's titled. And he writes this right before he dies. He lives to be 76 years old, which is very old in the ancient world, and so he rules for a very long time, and he writes this kind of memoir toward the end of his life. In it, he says the thing that he is most proud of is Pax Augusta, is the long sustained period of peace that he's able to oversee as emperor. So this is a monument to that peace. It's called the Ara Pacis Augustae, or the Altar of Augustan Peace. It's sort of similar if you think back to our unit on the ancient Greeks, the altar to Zeus, where it's kind of not really a building, but it's not just a sculpture, it's kind of a monument, kind of an in-between thing. This is also like that. So the west facade of the Altar of Augustan Peace celebrated what he considered his most important achievement, which is just bringing peace to Rome, okay? The Senate dedicates this monument on Livia, Augustus's wife, his empress's birthday. And so the east and west facades feature mythological scenes. We have Aeneas making a sacrifice. Aeneas is the relative of Caesar, so Octavian Augustus traces his heritage back to him, and Aeneas is the one who was Venus's son. So that's where he traces his godlike divinity to. So Aeneas was in the Trojan War. He was the son of Venus. He was kind of one of Rome's first big heroes. Virgil writes about him in his work, the Aeneid, which is about Aeneas. Okay. Also, we have Augustus highlighting his connection there because, just like with Cupid in his portrait, he wants to show that he's connected to Julius Caesar and also that he is connected all the way back directly to the gods. The second panel is of there's some debate, so this is the panel up above in the upper right-hand corner here. There's some debate about who this is. Most scholars think it's Tellus, who's kind of like a Mother Earth or Gaius type figure. Some people think it's Ceres, the goddess of grain, or maybe just the personification of peace in general. There's a lot of debate, but basically, whomever she is specifically, she's meant to show the embodiment of peace on earth, and specifically peace in the Roman Empire brought on by Augustus. So we have this bountiful earth all around her. If you look at what's happening, we have babies sitting on her lap because there's lots of babies being born because it's a time of peace. There's animals laying down peacefully together. There's lots of crops and just everything is bountiful and kind of running over. The other figures are the personifications of breezes. So we have the one on a sea serpent is like the ocean breeze, or the winds coming in off the sea, and the one on a bird is kind of like all the winds coming from the sky. So it's just showing that there's peace on the earth where the animals and the grain and everything are from, and also in the sea and the sky. So peace everywhere, everything is happy and unified, earth, sky, water, all in harmony and peace. Another panel, which is in the lower left here, features the procession of the imperial family. And this is interesting because we're seeing relief being used kind of to show atmospheric perspective. So from a technical perspective, the figures that are closer up in the foreground are in higher relief or more deeply carved and more three-dimensional than the figures in the middle ground, and even more so than the figures in the background. So atmospheric perspective in painting is where things become hazy and less defined as they recede, so they recede backward in the picture plane to give the illusion of depth. So in sculpture, you can do the same thing by having higher relief, more three-dimensional things in the forefront because you'd be able to see them better, and things in the background kind of becoming more flat and in the distance. We also see that the children kind of look like children here, which in some of our previous sculptural depictions of children, they just look like tiny adults. These are kind of acting like children. They're kind of clinging to their people and looking around and fidgeting. So we have a more realistic kind of depiction of children. So basically, this whole thing is just showing that during the time of Augustus, it's kind of the golden age of Rome. We have marriage and children and peace and lots of grain, and everything's in harmony. So that's what's being shown here. Okay, form of Augustus. So emperors all want their own form. It's kind of a thing that we see throughout the Roman Empire, and so the form of Augustus is quite large. It's the largest one. He makes sure to complete the work on Julius Caesar's forum, which was not finished, and then he begins construction on his own directly next to it. It's all made out of white marble from Carrara, not just a veneer or facade of marble or marble dust mixed in with plaster. It is all 100% made out of white marble, so real marble. New quarries were discovered of Carrara marble. A very famous boast, also from Octavian Augustus's memoir, is that he found Rome as a city of brick and made it a city of marble. So he's very proud of the wealth and prosperity and everything that happens in Rome while he's in charge. This, you can see the design. We have this kind of big courtyard. We have these rows of this colonnade, and then we have rows of sculptures of great men on either side, featuring Aeneas again, which is his relative, and also featuring Romulus, the founder of Rome. And then we have a shrine to Venus, Mars, again, Venus, his direct relative through Julius Caesar and through Aeneas, and then Mars, who is Venus's brother and lover, which is gross, I know, but that's, Roman god stuff, and he's the god of war, so he wants to make that connection really known. And then Julius Caesar also is, there's a shrine to him in the temple in the Forum, because remember, he was deified under pressure from Octavian Augustus. Okay, we also have the colonnades. Some of them featured caryatids, which we saw in Athens, in the Erechtheion, that's the statues of women replacing columns. So that feature is copied here. It's in ruins today. You can see what's left of it in the image in the upper left corner here, but many of the people who worked on it also worked on this structure in France. So France is part of Rome at this time, and we have Maison Carrée. If you took French, you know Maison Carrée means, maison means house, carré means square, so it is the square house. Super creative name, not really. Okay, so this is in Nimes, France. And it is built in southern France in Roman times. France was Gaul, and then the Romans defeat the Gauls and kind of take over. This is the best surviving example of Augustinian architecture, which we consider classical Roman architecture, okay? And as you can see, it's in the Corinthian order, and like other Roman temples we've seen, we have the kind of elements of Greek architecture. So we've got Corinthian columns, we've got a pediment, we've got sort of a frieze. We also have a coffered ceiling on the porch that's highly decorated, but then we have this Etruscan layout again, where the naos or cella is completely enclosed on three sides, and we've engaged columns all the way around. This is all also made out of marble. Also in Nimes, France, made during this time period, a little bit earlier, but during the reign of Octavian Augustus, is the Great Aqueduct Bridge. This goes over the Gard River, and it's known today as Pont de Gard. An aqueduct is one of the great Roman inventions. So this is something that carries water, in this case from the mountains to the Tiber River, in the Romans' case. So water is able to be carried over hundreds and hundreds of miles, 100 gallons a day to Nimes from a source 30 miles away. The two reasons this is able to be created and structurally sound and still standing today, even though it was built in 16 BC, are concrete, it's made out of concrete, and arches. So if someone were to ask you a question on a quiz or your final, you need to identify this as an aqueduct, and you need to know that it is structurally possible because of arches and concrete. Okay. Lastly, we'll look at this, and then I'll end this lecture and we'll start up again. This is the Porta Maggiore, excuse me. It's built by Claudius, so he is related to Augustus. He's in the Julian line, and it's a porta, which means it's a gate. It's very cleverly designed. So up in these upper layers, the aqueducts of the city of Rome were concealed within this structure. So it looks like it's just a gate, but it had all of these pipes taking water within the interior. This would have extended out. One of the things to think about is it's done in this totally different style. So Octavian Augustus is known for this really smooth, beautiful marble, very decorative kind of look. So Claudius wants to distinguish himself and set a different kind of aesthetic during his reign. And so this rusticated masonry becomes really popular. It's where it's kind of to contrast with the Augustan and Greek designs that were very smooth and marble. So this is dressed masonry that's carved to look like columns. And it's meant to look really rough, like rough-hewn rocks. So these are columns, but they're meant to look really rough. So it's kind of like that intentionally distressed sort of country chic whatever look that's popular in interior design today. It's like this looks very roughed up, but it looked like that when it was new also. Okay, so next we will talk about the Domus Aurea.